Welcome to the Powerful Marketing Tips Podcast, created for overwhelmed business owners who want to build, run, and organize their marketing for good. And here's a brief overview of our guest. Break through your limitations. This is what today's guest, Stephen Scoggins, encourages everybody to do. From homelessness to heartfelt industry leader, Stephen Scoggins is an 8-figure serial entrepreneur of multiple businesses who has dedicated himself to serving the person he used to be. Through his proprietary curriculum of Transform You Life Mastery Systems, he guides others towards their ultimate potential in order to elevate their possibilities. Stephen is also the host of Stuck to Unstoppable, a podcast in which he interviews the world's foremost thought leaders to break things down in order to help you get past your hurts and hang-ups to finally level up and move forward. Listen to the interview to hear his inspiring story.
Hi, everybody. So it might happen to us all, and mostly on New Year's Eve, but for some of us even more often, we make those plans. We have great plans. We create vision boards. We write down even our KPIs, which are key performance indicators, right? And we really dream of living our dreams life personally and, of course, professionally. But it remains only a dream too often, right? Because there are so many things on our way. We are constantly busy. We have setbacks, failures, and we really start to procrastinate with things that really matter. But deep inside, we are not happy, and we feel a lot of fear even, because we don't want to fail professionally or personally. As we record this interview today, we have 18 days until the New Year's Eve, and I feel it is the best time to talk about how to achieve success on 2022. So welcome, Stephen, to our podcast.
Hey, how are you? So good to see you.
I'm great. So thank you for coming. So I would definitely ask you to walk us through your own journey with us here today, as I would really like to, boost this inspiration to our listeners here today. But first, I'd like you to comment on what I just shared as an introduction to this interview. I know where we all are, with our thoughts on the New Year's Eve or January 1st, but what happens really to almost a day after it?
Well, I think that the day after is you start off with really good intentions, but unfortunately, if it's not followed up by actions, you get yourself in a lot of trouble. It doesn't take long, especially, I don't know about you, but the older I've gotten, the quicker life seems to move. So, when I was 10 or 12 years old, it seems like summertime or springtime would last forever. And now it seems like it's a blip, like it's gone. Like it's already, we're already at the end of 2021, and I feel like it just started, which is kind of weird. So having your key performance indicators and having your vision board and having those things are important. But I think more importantly, it's just as important to actually take the action needed, if you will, in order to make those KPIs even possible, or your dream board even possible. And the reality is none of us know what each year is going to bring. Like we don't know if there's going to be a pandemic that comes out of nowhere, or if we're going to have a robust economy, or this government decides to do things this way versus this way when they've done them this way for 20 years. And and the reality is, as a small business owner, entrepreneur, you're going to have to be flexible. So many of the programs that I see that struggle are so rigid that they can't adapt to the marketplace. So I personally would go into 2022 with an intentional, prioritized action database of this is the action I've got to take to get the biggest lift. But I'd also go into it with a certain amount of flexibility because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what the economy and the market could or could not do. And in the U.S. there's this thing they call it's a bull market. It's a bull market. It's a bull market, right? So that typically means our economy is being super successful and all this kind of stuff. Well, there's also something called the bear market. And the bear market typically means that obviously the economy is doing really, really bad, and it's in a recession, and if you go far enough back, it'd be in a depression kind of thing. And one of my wisest mentors told me a long time ago is while everyone is running with the bulls, always be aware that the bear is right behind them. And I think that kept me out of trouble. Unfortunately, that it didn't for a lot of other business owners, especially when the pandemic hit. because I wasn't focused on all the winning, just winning, just winning, just winning, just winning, just winning. I was, okay, well, how do I prepare for 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And so many times when we take those needed actions, the actions that we need to take need to be thought out to the point, okay, if I take this action this way, what does that look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 10 years from now? As early stage entrepreneurs, or what I refer to as everyday entrepreneurs, there's a lot of gunslinging going on, right? Problem happens, solution. Problem happens, solution. Problem happens, solution. And only about 50% of those are going to work out in your favor because you're not thinking about 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, 15 years ahead. So it's all about creating leverage. So I think if you go into 2022 with that methodology, I think you'll be super successful.
Yeah, but I agree with you here very much. But what happens if oftentimes if the setback really comes, then, we forget about our goals in 5 years. Mm-hmm. What would be your suggestion here?
So much of being a successful entrepreneur is just never giving up. I know that sounds crazy. I started my first business when I was homeless, and I literally out of the trash piles, I pulled things out of a construction site to build my first construction business. And I've learned a long time ago that, there's an old adage in the U.S. that says, where there's a will, there's a way. And I really believe that's true for anyone and everyone. You may not, I didn't hit my 2021 goals with my construction business this year. Right? It wasn't that we were unsuccessful, but we weren't as successful as we would want to be or had projected to be. And I got two choices in that moment. I can either sit and suck my thumb and say, it was so bad, I just didn't do it, or I could say, okay, well, that's 2021. Let's go ahead and take what we can learn from 2021. What did we learn? How can we use that to apply us and maybe help us catapult in 2022? Because I discovered that businesses go through ebb and flows. Consistently. So most companies will go through a growth year and then what I refer to as a stabilization year, and then a growth year and then a stabilization year. Basically, your growth happens, and then your processes, systems, and organization has to follow that growth to stabilize it, and then that elevates you for another growth pattern. The trick is if you get stuck not understanding that that's a natural ebb and flow of business, then if you go into a stabilization year when the previous year was growth, you're going to feel like you're less successful than you really are. When really what you're doing is your business is catching up to your growth. Mm-hmm, and I find that businesses that will focus in that category and just understand that it's not going to be a rocket ship ride. I don't know any entrepreneurs whatsoever that have won year after year after year after year. You can win for 3 to 5 years straight and probably not have a whole lot of negativity or things that come up. But the reality is, in a 5-year window, your leadership has to change. Your team has to change. Your business has to change. Your customer acquisition strategy will likely have to change. How that user experience is going to have to change. So it's foolish to think that what's working right now is going to work for 10 years. So I think just by understanding that business is a journey and it's not a destination will help a lot of folks.
That's true. Business is a journey. But what also happens is that we lose that focus, right? Mm-hmm. So, of course, there is a setback, and I understand that, okay, I should go forward and forward. But, the everyday comes, and I'm overwhelmed. I'm always busy. What are your thoughts here? How should I, focus myself every day?
Oh, gosh. Focus. Focus is tricky. Focus a lot of times leads to guilt. Right. So you're at home with your family. You think you should be at work. Then you're at work and then you're like, oh no, I need to be at home with my family. Mm-hmm. What I'm having to do now in my own life now, I own currently 7 different businesses. Unique. They range from construction to thought leadership, to real estate and some other stuff. And in each one of them, they require a certain amount of my time. So what I've had to do is I've had to bucket certain amounts of my time to make sure I'm focused on every business in a specific way. So for Mondays, for example, are typically my flex days. Those are the days in which I work on the business that most needs my attention. Where Tuesdays might be the Journey Principles Institute, which is my thought leadership business. That's a thought leadership specifically day. Wednesdays might be my construction company's business. And then Thursdays is followed by another thought leadership. You see what I'm saying? You're strategizing how to be able to focus on any one given area. Because you can get lost in, oh, I need to be here. Oh, I need to be here. Oh, I need to be over here. I need to be over here. Oh, I have this idea. Then I have this idea. Then I have this idea. And what I've discovered is if you want to increase your focus, you have to plan that focus out in advance. So I get up every day at a very specific time. I have a very routine oriented thing before I head into my businesses. And then I function within that set amount of time in the business, focused on that particular business, only to then hopefully wrap up my day and go home to my family and try to lead business at work. And if you're going to increase your level of focus, you have to increase the intentionality of that which it actually creates the focus, right? Most entrepreneurs do not live by a reinforceable routine. They react to the day versus planning the day because it's more easy. It's easier to react than it is to plan, right? However, if you look at the most successful businesses on the planet, the most successful militaries on the planet, all of them do everything by strategizing and planning in advance, intentionally, on purpose, with clockwork. And then what happens is you're able to get out of that brain dump mode and then walk yourself into a more systematic approach to building your business.
You should be able to adapt every day because unexpected things happen, right?
Yeah. So budget that in your day. See, most people don't do that. They'll bucket their meetings so close back to back, there's no breathing room. And then they go home to their spouse or their significant other and be like, "What'd you do today?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." Right? You literally go home brain fried, and it's because there was no gap, there's no break, there's no breathing room. You know, we're having this interview now. After this interview, I'll have about a 15-minute break before I go into my next thing for the day to allow my brain to reset, to allow me to maybe reflect on some notes or some things that maybe we chatted about. By giving your brain a break, it will actually increase the capacity of which it holds. So, I would definitely make sure you plan that inside your day.
I cannot imagine even living without, planning and putting a calendar out there. Otherwise, it is crazy, especially when you run 7 business like yourself. So, would you mind sharing with us your morning routine? If not all of this, but just give us share this idea of why is it important to you and what do you do during this time?
Well, I think the reason it's important is because life can get away from you fast if you're not intentional about it. We just kind of mentioned that. My first mentor, a guy by the name of Steve Myrick, taught me a very valuable lesson. Unfortunately, when he contracted pneumonia, later passed away. But my father and I went to go see him in the hospital. And Steve Myrick, my first mentor, was very, very successful entrepreneur, very successful across multiple states. He was a very good businessman, very generous person. He, like everybody else, has their own little faults and things of that nature. But I'll never forget this for as long as I live. We went to go see him in the hospital, and while we were sitting there, my dad was bragging to him about all the wonderful things that he had done, all the money he had made, all the places he had been, and all the people he had been around. And Steve Myrick took the mask off his face. He looked at my dad, and he said, "What good is all that wealth and that notoriety and prestige without any health?" And he put the mask back on his face and went kind of like peacefully kind of back to relaxing as you kind of watch the breath kind of, go back and forth on the mask. The reason that spoke to me is because the one thing that all entrepreneurs I find struggle with is they put so much emphasis on the business that ultimately the business ends up taking back from them what matters to them most, which is life and health and relationship and things of that nature. As a result, that one lesson taught me a great deal. So my day first starts off, I get up at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every morning, and I'll spend time in prayer and meditation for probably the first 15 to 20 minutes. And when I'm doing that, I'm intentionally, I'm a person of faith, so I'm asking God to send the right people to my life, give me the right wisdom to conquer the day, allow me to be a blessing to other people, allow me to be a good servant, that kind of stuff. And I'm just kind of spending moments in that moment of gratitude and peace. And while I'm doing that, I'm intentionally not looking at my phone. I'm intentionally not looking at my social media. I'm intentionally not looking at anything other than being focused in the moment, present in the moment. Because I've discovered that when you do that, the day starts off a whole lot better, right? So I try to feed my spirit first thing. My second thing that I do is I immediately hit the local gym here in the States. We're fortunately very, open with gyms and stuff again. But even when COVID had us shut down, I was still walking and jogging around the block, right? And that goes back to that lesson that Steve Meyer told me, which is, what good is wealth if you have no health? Like, what good is it if you're drinking sodas all day long, all these different pops or whatever they call them, the Pepsis and the whatever they're called, and you're eating candy all the time, and you're loading up on carbs, and you're loading up on high levels of sugar-based nutrients that essentially end up taking you out because you develop insulin resistance, which then leads to heart disease, then leads to this, then leads to that. Why not be intentional and get up and spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes? I spend an hour a day working out, and I find out that when I start off with gratitude, then I go into working out, and then I go into my day and start doing my meetings with my breaks that I was just talking about, I end up having a much more successful day. My number one, my blood's pumping. Number two, my cortisol levels constantly dropping. And as an everyday entrepreneur, you are going to have stress, right? When you are the only person you can look back to and ask a question to, because you're the CEO, the chief everything officer, and you're trying to do like all of this kind of stuff, your cortisol level is going to raise. Well, if you don't have a battle plan against the cortisol, then your muscle tissue breaks down. And your muscle tissue breaks down, then you start having neuro issues and cardiovascular issues and so on and so forth. I say all that because, again, I think as an entrepreneur, there's a tendency to, alarm goes off, you grab a cup of coffee, maybe you have a moment to yourself, maybe you don't, and then you're out the door, you got to go lead your team, you got to go, build the business, slay the dragon, whatever terminology you want to use. And then the day's over and you're like, okay, what'd I do today? And you're like, I don't freaking know what I did today. I have no idea. Right? And that's entrepreneurship 101. And that's what I'm saying is, if you're going to build a business, then you got to be building yourself at the same time. Now, building yourself is a tool or a belief that I've had for a long time. So one, gratitude, prayer and meditation in the morning, immediately into exercise. And then one of the things that I do that I think is a little unique, and I haven't heard other people talk about, is I focus on personal growth on a specific area of my life each day of the week. Okay? So, for example, we have this terminology called 8 pillars of life. Zig Ziglar calls us 7, the wheel of life, which has 7 slices. Our pillars have 8. We added contribution because I think if you're not making a contribution, you're never going to be fulfilled and have meaning. But on Mondays, for example, like this morning, I worked on finance. Like I was learning about cryptocurrencies and not from people who are trying to sell me cryptocurrencies. I'm learning from people who, either invest or don't invest, and you're just trying to learn more about it, right? I'm not actively investing in cryptocurrencies, but I am learning about it, right? Because I want to be informed as I'm going along. Well, tomorrow I'm not going to be focused on finance. Tomorrow I'm going to be focused on emotional well-being, right? How do I continue to grow my emotional response in such a way that brings people towards me rather than repels them from me, right? And then Wednesday, I'll go and focus on my spiritual nature. And after my spiritual nature, then it'll be my professional nature. And my professional nature, and each day of the week, there's something key to focus on, which helps me build a well-rounded approach. And all of this happens before I even get into my day. So I had somebody ask me not long ago, well, I don't understand. Like, I don't have time for that. I'm like, how do you not have time for it? Well, it's because, my day starts at 7. I was like, we'll get up earlier. Well, but then I'll miss the Tonight Show. You can record it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
and nothing happens when you watch the night show. Really.
Exactly.
If you don't watch it, that's what.
I'm not sure what it is like in Europe, but the average American spends 5 hours a day in front of a media source.
I know. I'm not sure if the number is exactly the same here, but I'm sure it's very close. Maybe even bigger.
So 5 hours a day is 25 hours a week that you're not using with your growing yourself, developing a healthy relationship with your family, or even learning and building more about your business.
Wasting the most valuable resource, your own time, really.
Exactly.
Well, I love your morning rituals. I'm also a big fan myself of Hal Elrod, of course, the morning rituals. And I'm curious, how long have you practiced those? Because I know I started myself 7 years ago, so it has taken a very long time. And why I'm asking this is because for this overwhelmed business owner who never done this, it can be very it can be too much at the beginning, because when I started with that, I also took only 30 minutes every morning. But now I also start 5 a.m. and I give 2 hours to myself, pretty much, following the same principles as yourself. And I love to call it MIP time, which is most important person.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but tell me, how long did it take for you to really turn it into your habit?
Yeah, well, the natural evolution was this. I was probably in business 3 years before I realized that I was more stressed and more stressed out, overwhelmed, frustrated than I'd ever been before in my entire life. But yet I had a big vision, and I wasn't ready to give up my big vision. So then the question became, well, how is it possible, or how can I reduce my level of stress and the things that I'm carrying with me? And then I began to seek out mentors and thought leaders in the area of just balance, right? Trying to figure out what that means for me. And you're right. When you start getting some of this feedback, you spend 30 minutes in gratitude. Really? That's going to help me? Are you serious? Right? Really? Yeah. Spend 30 minutes, in an aerobic exercise or doing something that's going to be a pump your blood. Are you serious? Really? And it finally got to that place where my ego and my pride and my stubbornness finally got out of my way. And I'm like, you know what? I got nothing to lose. I'll try it. And then I put into practice, like I said, about 3 years in, I put into practice of gratitude every morning, or prayer and meditation, my form of gratitude. And you know what? I said, I'm going to do this for a week. I'm not going to miss a day, and I'll see where it goes. Well, of course, Monday rolls around. I'm like, all right, please send great people. Please do this. Here's my laundry list of all the needs and wants that I have. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not actually being thankful about anything. That's like trying to rub a genie, right? And trying to get some out of their lamp. And so Monday went into Tuesday. Tuesday, I finally started getting the hang of it. And Wednesday, I started by actually saying, okay, I'm legitimately happy that I actually had air in my lungs this morning. I'm legitimately happy that I woke up and the sun's coming up. I'm legitimately happy that I have an opportunity to serve other people. And that process began to build, and that went from Wednesday to Thursday. And then I started I actually like this. I legitimately feel better when I do this. And when I don't do this, I don't feel as good. Maybe there's something to this. I wonder if there's something to this workout thing. Let me add that to my rule. And essentially the muscle memory took over after about 3 months of actually starting some of these principles. And then like anything else, you hone it, you figure out what you really like. Like I'm a gym rat. I like going to the gym. Like I like actually picking heavy stuff up and putting it down. Like my wife says, it's kind of a joke, running joke. Pick up something heavy, put it down. You're kind of like Neanderthal kind of thinking. But I also like playing, I played ice hockey for a while, and I love playing hockey. And, there's got to be things that you naturally gravitate towards, but you also have to be aware that it's going to naturally evolve into what your routine should be. What you and I are basically saying is you need to have an element of thankfulness, you need to have an element of physicality, you need to have an element of personal growth. If you do those three things on a daily basis, not only will your business win, but you will also win as a human being.
Yeah. And you can also learn about this, how to do this, as you are focusing on different topics every morning. One morning you can also learn about actually, how to have those affirmations and how to really work on your gratitude and work on your meditations and everything, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we want to make sure, like I said, it's a process. We as human beings have to stop seeing business and life as a destination and just simply enjoy the process. And I'm in that weird place now. Like I'm constantly having to remind myself in today's environment, okay, yes, we're going here. We want to go here. But what can we learn along the way? How are we developing along the way? Because these are the stories that we share on podcasts, right? We don't share stories around the destination. We share stories around the journey and the steps that we took and the lessons we learned and the people we helped or the people that helped us or the mentorship we gave or received. That's where the wisdom is shaped. And at the end of the day, the only thing you can really leave behind is wisdom. It's all you can really leave behind to other people. So that's been my experience anyway.
Wow, love it. No, that's very deep, and I can totally relate to your balancing yourself really here with everything you just spoke about. But let's talk about this getting out of your own way, because this is the thing you talk about a lot. So I know there are people listening right now who are, pretty much on their own way. They are those obstacles on this journey, really. Of course, we start to blame everything else, the weather and the COVID and everything we can, but still we know that it really depends on us. So tell us, how should one get out of their own way, really?
Yeah, sure. Well, I would say the first thing is just realize that everybody in some way, shape, or form is currently in their own way. And your ability to get out of your own way is going to come down to how quickly you can swallow your pride. How quickly you have to be the solution to every problem, how quickly you have to be the person that everybody goes to for advice. What I've learned to do myself personally is as I'm constantly going to the market as a student, right? I've learned great things from my team members. I've learned great things from mentors. I've learned great things from movies, right? These life principles, these strategies, if you will. And I also find that people who are in their own way are typically operating from a place of insecurity. Okay. So I'll try to break that down a little bit. So when I first started my first business, because of my difficult my difficult upbringing, I didn't have any money. I was obviously growing a business from scratch. I had no college degree. I didn't graduate high school. Like, I had everything in theory that should hold me back from being successful, right? The reality is that actually wasn't really holding me back. What was really holding me back was how I believed and what meaning I sought about myself in those circumstances, right? I had people with CPAs and CFOs and, all these different acronyms behind their names, all working with me, right? All a part of my executive team, my leadership team. And here I am, the high school dropout. So my biggest mistake in business, in many cases, was trying to build a business without building myself, which ultimately meant that I was constantly going to them from a place of insecurity. Okay. I don't want them to know that I don't have it all figured out. I don't want them to know that I'm just winging it. I don't want them to know that all I know how to do is go out and get customers and serve the customer. Like, I don't want them to know I don't know what a SWOT plan is. I don't want anybody, like, that is being the definition of being in your own way. And I've learned the quickest way to get out of your own way is to actually begin to be authentic and transparent about the things that terrify you most, even with your leadership team. Because what it does is it forces you to let the ego down and bring the ego down and bring that stuff down. And then inevitably what happens is all of a sudden the people that you need the mentorship from begin to show up. Right? Because they see you as moving from maybe not as humble as you should be to becoming very hungry for knowledge, being very hungry for growth. I think about my mentors all the time because I'm sure I was a challenging case for them. I challenged them because, they would give me advice and I wouldn't listen. They'd give me more advice and I still wouldn't listen. They give me more advice and I wouldn't listen some more. And then they finally give me some more advice and they're like, okay, you've been homeless now. Now will you listen? Right? And you don't have to go to that extreme, of course, but the reality is being in your own way is nothing more than not being able to acknowledge the things that you need to grow and excel at. And most of us want to point the finger, for example, at other things. I'll give you a recent one that for me. I had a team member of mine in one of my businesses that I chose to promote to a position they may or may not have been ready for. Right? They've been with the company a while. I wanted to give them a shot. I believed in them. They'd always been a hardworking team member. They'd always been on point. They'd always done the right things. But they weren't necessarily qualified for the role, training-wise, that they should have had probably be going into that position. Well, okay. 6 months goes in, 8 months goes in. We're having all kinds of issues in this department, trying to figure out what's going on. I'm like, what in the world is going on with this department? Are you serious? And as we dig in, we're learning that the team members making mistakes on a consistent basis. They've got some life things that are going on that are adding to that and exacerbating that problem. And at one point, unfortunately, the team member is relieved of their duties and was, is now working somewhere else. And at the end of the day, it would have been very easy for me to say, hey, you're not doing your job. You're not doing your thing. You don't have the training. You don't have all these different things. The reality was it was my decision to put them in that role. My decision, which means I have responsibility and I bear responsibility in that. Had I gone to my management team and pointed my finger at that team member repeatedly and not taking ownership of the mistake that I made, then I would have looked less like a leader to my management team. Not to mention, I wouldn't have given them permission to do the same thing. What you want to do is, especially in getting out of here, you want to take extreme accountability. But anytime that praise can be given to you, that's the time you give the praise away. Anytime someone else is making the problems and having the issues, rather than saying, hey, it's so and so, it's so and so, it's so and so, it's so and so, or this is why, you're pointing all these different things. You need to be asking yourself, okay, how did I play a role in this? Because if you have team members or you have employees or whatever, they didn't just stumble their way into your business. You hired them, or someone hired them, and you hired the person that hired them. So at some point in time, you had a hand in those decisions. But that's, again, being transparent and authentic.
Wow, I love it. As you run this business, you really should be responsible for every decision, right? So what I wanted to ask, I love how you put it. It's building your business starts with building yourself. Would you mind sharing with us your story? How did you really build it yourself? Because I know that your story is very strong and very powerful.
Well, thank you. Well, I mean, so my story is for those of you guys who watch movies, is a lot like Forrest Gump. Lots of little bitty lifetimes packed into one movie. That's kind of how my life feels. As a person of faith, we joke around about being Joseph in the Bible and that kind of thing. But there are so many different stories. I'll tell you that I grew up in a way in which I unfortunately I see a lot more common. It used to be a lot less common when I was growing up. It's a lot more common now, which is this environment of a broken home, right? With mom and dad either not around, not present, or if they are present, they're fighting and arguing and all this kind of stuff. And my father struggled from alcoholism for a number of years, and my mother, unfortunately, was abused when she was growing up. And as a result, you have two broken people trying to have a whole marriage, which then, unfortunately, obviously doesn't end very well. And then I end up going to live with my grandmother. Well, around the age of 11 years old, she passes away. My father comes back in the position, and I started getting straight into the construction field. And, if it wasn't
but you were 11.
Huh?
You were 11 at that time.
Yes, I was 11.
Oh my God.
Yeah, 11 years old. I literally, day one with my father, 5 a.m. we wake up and he puts me in the car. We're off to a job site somewhere. And I began carrying lumber or, studs and 2x4s and wood, essentially, as my job. And I did that every summer, every weekend, every holiday. Anytime that I wasn't in school, I was on a construction site. Well, by the time I got to 16, my father's business began to struggle quite a bit. And lo and behold, within a year's time, he unfortunately lost his business, and we lost, obviously, all the personal belongings that went with it, foreclosures and repossessions and all the stuff that happens when you've got way too much debt and not enough income, right? And which is why I'm a debt-free fanatic. My businesses, I try to keep them debt-free if at all possible. And one of the things that happened with that is I finally got so tired of the family struggling financially that I actually dropped out of high school. And then I began to I went and got a full-time job and then began helping my family pay the bills until it's a point in time where I finally moved out on my own at 17. So I've been on my own since I was 17. Well, shortly thereafter, I actually got an opportunity to start my first business by Steve Myrick, the guy that I mentioned earlier. And he bought me everything that I needed. He bought me all the tools. He bought me all the equipment. He bought me everything I needed to get going. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And like any other knuckleheaded 19-year-old, I making a bunch of money, never been trained to handle money. I went and blew every penny of it. I spent money on stupid stuff. I bought the sports car. I did all the stupid things you're not supposed to do when you first start a business, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that. They want this lifestyle over here, and they start making a little money, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go get my lifestyle now." And really, what they should be doing is like, hold still for a minute, right? You need to have some liquidity. Like, wait, give it a second. And within a year's time frame, I got involved in a toxic relationship because, that's what I grew up in. So I was accustomed to people that have had a toxicness to them, so to speak. And within a year's time after that, I'd lost everything. And I found myself essentially homeless, and I went in a public restroom one time looking at myself in the mirror going, how the heck did I get here? Like, what in the world am I thinking? And it dawned on me that the whole reason that I ever got that far is because I refused to let other people know that I was struggling. I refused to let other people know that I needed teaching. I refused to let other people know that my emotions were a wreck. And again, I think in order to have any level of transformation, you have to be radically transparent with yourself. And that's essentially what kind of led me down that path. And
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, can you share, when was it? What was the time? I mean, what year was it back then?
Yeah, so this would have been the 97 category, 1997,
okay.
Midway in 97, when all this was going down. I had a moment where I was going to go and join the military. That didn't work out. And pretty much I'd only known a life of failure up until that point. I almost took my life at a bridge in Capitol Boulevard at 440 and had a divine encounter, so to speak, where my high school girlfriend's mother answered a last-ditch phone call for me to talk to her. She talked me off the bridge. She also gave me 11 words that turned out to be kind of like prophetic in nature. She said, "This too shall pass, and what comes next will be greater," because she knew I was in pain. She had me screaming it at the top of my lungs, like from the bridge. It was crazy.
Oh my God.
And then I found myself, couch surfing back at my dad's place, only to go get the second chance that I didn't know I needed and I didn't know was coming. And what I mean by that is my dad got me back on his construction crew, which was also working for Steve Myrick, who was the guy that gave me the first chance to begin with. And I'm good. I'm there. I have nothing. I have no tools, no nothing. I'm just kind of like starting over, so to speak. And Friday rolls around. And as Friday rolls around, we have this, at least then they had this issue where everybody got paid on Friday and you would leave at 2:00 on Friday. You basically go start your early weekend, essentially. Right. And that was natural for the construction industry. Well, Steve was kind of going to bring in the checks because he would come and bring the checks. My dad would go grab the checks and come and hand deliver all the checks to us. Right. Well, I started walking past him and he starts walking past me because I had just overheard the guys who had taken over from me just really bad mouthing Steve. He's not paying this. He's not doing that. None of it was true. And as a result, I found myself in a really, really weird place. And I found this fire, if you will, kind of like beating up inside of me, trying to understand, okay, well, wow, how dare they? And that kind of thing was like, and then it's the quiet voice in my spirit kind of said, well, didn't you do the same thing? And that fired me up with a level of boldness. And as my dad's walking this way with the checks, I'm passing by him and I'm walking back towards Steve and his Jeep Grand Cherokee. And my dad's like, where are you going, boy? Like, where? Kind of thing. I knock on Steve's window. He rolls the window down. He goes, how's your head now, boy? So, it's getting better. What can I do you for? I overheard these guys over here, and they're saying that if they don't do this, that, or the other thing, they're not coming back Monday. Can I take back over for them? He started laughing. He's, boy, what are you talking about? You got no tools, you got no equipment, you got no insurance, you got no people, you got no nothing. And I looked at him dead in his eyes, and I said, I'll figure it out. He was like, figured it out. Huh. And we bantered back and forth for a few more minutes. And he said, I'll tell you what, if those boys don't come back by 9 a.m. on Monday morning, I'll let you take over for them. And we'll finish that house. And we'll see where things go from there. I said, okay, done.
Okay.
I walk away from the Jeep. My dad's walking up to me. He's freaking out. What have you done? I just got you back on this framing crew. He's livid. He's mad. I kind of go off. I'm like, you don't understand. This is something I've got to do. I just kind of went off at it. And my dad goes and opens this beat up work van that he had that Steve technically owned. Opens it up, begins pulling tools out of it. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, well, do you remember what we made the poles out of when you were a kid? Yeah, wood. Ladders, wood. Scaffolding, wood. Saw benches, wood. Braces, wood. He goes, all right, boys, start pulling lumber out of the trash piles. We got stuff to build. And we did. We went over to the construction trash piles that had all the leftover lumber in it. We began pulling out pieces, piece by piece, taking leftover nails on the job site and banging them in. And Monday morning, I was there on the curb at 6:30, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, at 9:02, Steve rolls around with his Jeep and says, "Boy, what you waiting on?" And I went to work. And that business is turned into my flagship business that's, operates in a couple of states. And I've got hundreds of amazing team members. And, that one business does close to 8 figures or does well into the 8 figures in revenue on an annual basis. And, it just goes to show that what you think your limitations are is a mirage. There really is no such thing as limitation. You can say, I don't have the money. Neither did I. I don't have the training. Neither did I. I didn't have the time. Neither did I. And you're left, at the end of the day, you're left with, okay, well, what's your excuse? What's your excuse? Your excuse is, if I want to go there, I'm going to have to grow me. I don't want to grow me. Well, then you can't go there.
That's hard.
The only way you get to grow you or grow the business is to grow you. They're mutually tied together. Right? You can't lead teams of hundreds if you can't lead teams of 3 or teams of 2. Right? And I think that goes to show what's possible when people take full ownership and are fully transparent with themselves and the teams they're trying to build. I think great things can happen.
Wow. What this story really tells me is that pretty much everything is possible if you are just, ready for this and if you take some action, right?
Absolutely.
So I saw recently you shared this 90-10 rule. It says that life is 90% of the attitude and knowledge, right? Used to deal with the situation, and only 10% what happens. It really, I really found it very, very true. And I don't know, is it your own rule, or did you read about this or somewhere? Because I love that.
Yeah, that rule's been out there for a long time. I think Zig Ziglar may have been the first person ever saw that used it. But the reality is that it goes back to extreme accountability, right? So you can either blame the world on why you're not being successful, or you can apply yourself in such a way that you have no choice but to be successful. In ice hockey, there's the I think it was Wayne Gretzky is one of the, main people in hockey in the States, obviously from the decades past. But he or another goalie or somebody said, because there was the game going on, and the referees were just bad. They were making bad calls left and right, and the team's down, and they go to the locker room. And they're, the ref's calls bad, and that guy over here, you check me, and all this kind of stuff. And lo and behold, one of the team members steps up, and I think it was either Wayne or the goalie they had at the time. He said, "Guys, we gotta be better. We have to be so good we can beat the refs." Right? And you actually see that happen in hockey. I've watched many a hockey game before where the team is behind, the refereeing has been horrible, and either the team kind of gives up, flips over, and turns away and runs and goes back to we'll get him next time kind of thing, or they step up and they're like, okay, fine, we're just going to outplay the bad behavior, right? And as entrepreneurs, an everyday entrepreneur, if you're going to be successful, you're going to have to outplay things that don't go your way. You just are. You're going to have customers that want to drop you because they find somebody cheaper and they're not properly valuing what you're doing. You're going to have team members that don't fit. You're going to have products or service that maybe doesn't work as well as you had hoped, or something that like you really believed in and it just doesn't take off. Those things are going to happen. The question is what happens when those things happen? Do you give up? Do you turn tail and run? Do you, well, I guess I'm not meant to do this, or do you stand up for yourself and like, okay, that didn't work. All right, so what do I try now? Let me try this. Will this work? Okay, well that didn't work. Let me try this. And if you'll be willing to be flexible enough, you will find your path. You will find your thing, and that's with team members, with leadership, with personal development, with growing a business. It's all of it, right? You just as an everyday entrepreneur, you simply cannot give up. The reality is if you're going to be successful in business, you're going to have to be flexible at all times. Things are not always going to go your way. but what you do in the moments when they don't go your way will ultimately define where your business goes. Right? My entrepreneurial life has not been all wins and no losses, or all successes and no sacrifices. It's actually been more losses and more sacrifices that ultimately gave me the skills and the tools and the strategies I needed to then grow myself and grow my business and hopefully grow my teams.
That's so deep, and I love what you just said, because, the setbacks and failures, they're always there, right? We cannot control them, and we cannot really blame everything what happens around us for not being where we want to be. So I really feel like your own story and your own thoughts here are very, very powerful and very inspiring for everybody, really. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Really, for being here and sharing this. So please tell us where you want people to go if they want to learn more about what you do, because I know they do want to do that.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, the easiest way to connect with me is just go to StephenScoggins.com with a PH. Stephen Scoggins, Scoggins. And then, if you like that, you probably enjoy Instagram with the same name, and, come check it out.
Wow. Love it. So, is there anything you want to say just to wrap it up, or for our listeners here, because I could go on and on, hours with this topic about self-growth and how to really build yourself. But maybe there is, I don't know, a thought or something you want to share as a wrap-up.
I would say this. The last couple of years for the vast majority of entrepreneurs has not been easy. They've had to pivot more. They've had to fight harder. They've had to challenge themselves, and those stresses come into your household. Obviously, as much as you don't want them to, you do carry them. I think the number one thing for 2022 is going to be this: take a deep breath, reassess, and try again. Right?
Wow.
If you're operating out of stress, then you're going to be stuck operating out of stress. I've repeatedly had to tell myself, even in the last few weeks, breathe, reassess what needs to change, what needs to be learned, who needs to be pivoted. You take off your emotional glasses and you put on your strategical glasses, right? And then you take a step. And the last couple of years have been very difficult for a lot of entrepreneurs. And I would just say it's normal to go through difficulty as a business owner. Don't take it personally, because it's not a semblance of who you are as an identity or as a person or something like that. Yes, there are things you need to learn. There are things you need to grow and develop. You are not your outcome. You are your effort.
Wow, that's deep. You are your effort. You're not your outcome. Thank you, Stephen, really. And before we go, please share and comment this song and quote that always inspire you to take action.
Oh, gosh. So there's an American artist out of Nashville. His name's Sam Tins, and he has a song called "This Is How Legends Are Made." I want everybody to go find that song on YouTube or wherever you do it. I want you to listen to it, and I want you to listen to the lyrics, because legends are made in moments of adversity, not in moments of mountain climbing. Right, so you become the legend, right? If you think about every legend in history, whether it's Beowulf or Superman or whatever, right? You think about all these different legends. They all became legends because they conquered what was difficult, and they became something more than they ever thought they could be. And I think as people, ultimately, we were all trying to have our own little hero journey. And I don't know, that song inspires me to try again and pivot, right? And
no, that's Steve, great. It will go to our Spotify list. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you gotta check it out for sure. And then Steve Meyer, my first mentor, who we talked about a couple times throughout the course of the show, told me one time in sitting in his Jeep Grand Cherokee, he said, "Stephen, if you want the secret to success, here it is." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" He said, "You have to be willing to do today what others won't, so you can have tomorrow what others don't." So when everybody else is watching a sports game, you're studying. When everybody else is going out with their friends and partying on a weekend, something like that, you're building your prototype, right? When everybody else is telling you can't do it, you're finding mentors and you're finding things that you can learn from to prove to you that you can do it. Because the only thing that separates the current you from the future you is the effort. right? So if we do things today that other people won't do, we will have things tomorrow that other people don't have because we paid the price.
We do every day, really. Wow, thank you, Stephen, and I really wish you, best of luck. Keep on doing this great work with helping people, get out of their own way, really. That's a great thing. That's a great thing you do. So again, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Sincerely, my pleasure. Take it easy. See ya.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Powerful Marketing Tips podcast. Make sure to link up with us at our free monthly international mastermind event. Just go to powerful-marketers.com/mastermind for registration. And one thing that would really help us and other new potential listeners is if you would rate this show and leave a comment wherever you tune in to listen. Until next time, take care.